Hey, Nob here. I'll be revealing to you the current top meta raid builds and strats that the top alliances and I use to reach those raid numbers you saw in King God Castle. This information, as usual, is kept under wraps within the English and Western audience, but is quite open to other communities. However, starting now, I'm going to start trying to break that mold. Though, keep in mind that the raid builds are continually tweaked and adjusted as relics and heroes get added and nerfed and buffed. In this video, I'll be showing you the current top meta raid build for the raid boss Blacksmith. So first things first, as usual, a little preface. This is intended for advanced and top-end players. Having said that, Awakened Heroes are definitely required. If you're a beginner, please feel free to ask within the community or stick around for future videos on my channel. I'll be showing you the standard build and positions, and it'll be exactly just that, very standard. It'll be up to you to tweak your position and build to suit your needs, and that's why practice mode exists, right? And lastly, knowing the build is only about 20% of the work. The rest comes from knowledge in raid forming, positioning, and pathing. A lot goes into it, all of which I won't be going over in this particular video. Alright, so let's quickly talk about what Blacksmith actually does, and I'll be talking about the boss as if the boss has all of the divine properties activated. So the Blacksmith skill, he will put a flame carpet under all of your units. That's what I call it. You'll be taking damage over time damage, DOTs, as well as auto attack damage from the boss, and then the units that are on top of the flame carpet, you'll be actually doing less damage. However, this isn't what actually makes Blacksmith tricky. It's actually the positional requirement that he has. So when you attack Blacksmith Boss from the front, the damage will be reduced by 60%. I know, yikes. So if you attack him from the back, however, you'll actually get a damage increase of 20% instead. So there's actually a build variant that uses TP Scroll to get behind the boss and take advantage of this, but the current meta actually doesn't use that. The current meta is actually forcing your main carry, usually it's Zhao Yun, to the side of the boss where you'll be doing your normal damage. No reduction, no increase, or anything. Alright, so let's talk about the build. I'll give you the TLDR reasons for each. I'll be breaking down the categories as usual, like so. Carry, supports, booster, conditional, and optional. For carry, we'll be using Zhao Yun with Awakening 1, which is standard for more damage. You actually don't see Awakening 1 outside of raids, so yeah. We will keep Zhao Yun at tier 5. If you get higher, great, but the standard stop is at tier 5. And also, we actually need a second Zhao Yun on the field at tier 1. Now, why is that? So tier 1 Zhao Yun is very key here for Blacksmith Boss, and it's to force Zhao Yun to go to side. And Zhao Yun is actually the standard to go to for Blacksmith Boss, which is actually what I'll be showing you here today. However, you can actually do the same build with Mel with the same concepts to achieve this as well. But today I'll be showing you the Zhao Yun build. So for supports, we'll be using Bard as usual, Awakening 1, and we'll be leaving at tier 3, which is standard. With Bard Awakening, she can be kept at only tier 3 while covering most, if not all, Lunaires. And then, of course, we'll be using Lunaire Awakening 2. You'll be filling the rest of your glove with her. And then if you have more Econ, you're going to try to get as high tier extra Lunes as possible. And of course, even with the Lunaire nerfs, it's still best to stack Lunaires. The other support that we'll be using is, of course, Alberon Awakening 1 if you have it. And it's standard to keep him at tier 4. And this is to, of course, hear through the boss skill damage. His flame carpets that do DOT damage, and that'll let us survive through it. So for damage booster for this video, I'll be recommending and using Mercil with Awakening 1. The Awakening doesn't really matter, and I'll be leaving her at tier 2 because the tier 1 glove spot is actually occupied by that extra Zhao Yun that we had to force our main carry to side, right? If you didn't already, there are 4 damage boosters in this game currently. They are Rahak that give 10%, no awakening needed. Mara and Rosette need awakenings, but they give 15%, and then Mercil, you don't need awakening, and she gives 15%. So she's really good, and she's also range. And with being a ranged unit, it's actually easier to keep her within Alberon's reach, so she can get healed and stay alive, right? Also, Mara is actually not a bad choice either for Blacksmith, because when she does her skill, it actually dodges out some of the flame carpet damage. So Mara is actually not bad. I actually use her sometimes too if I can't use Mercil on my team. And then for the last category, optional, Kane, of course, if you want to use him for more items. Otherwise, just put in a filler unit. Just make sure you don't put in a unit that you're intending on using for your other team, of course. For altars, I'll be running the standard 15 hero. For the other 10 points, as usual, I personally always use and recommend 10 greed. However, I know some people who prefer 10 blacksmith. Just try them both out and see which one you like. For relics, we'll be running the standard glove relic. Of course, if you don't know what that does, I'll leave a link down in the description below to my glove relic explanation video. For the other one, of course, the current meta is using Holy Cross from Arena. The last meta was actually Mass Relic, but it isn't actually good anymore due to the Lunaire nerfs. For relic stats, as mentioned in my mage build video, the more spell power is actually better for Zhao Yun builds, and you give it to Lunaire. Attack speed on Zhao Yun is actually kind of meh. Even though the build that I show you right here has attack speed, just know that spell power is actually the secret tech. For item prio, as usual, staffs on highest Lunaire is actually more important than bows on Zhao, as I mentioned. However, it's still good to go after that +1 attack count affix for huge damage. Swords on either, I usually put them on Zhao Yun first. Then the armor goes on Bard as standard. If you have extra bows, actually give them to Bard. It's actually helpful for her to sync up with Lunaire buffs. And then the +1 range effects will actually screw up your blacksmith builds since you can't force Zhao to side. It's important to know that Zhao is considered a range unit actually. So if you combine bows on him, you'll actually still be able to get that +1 range. So instead, just combine bows on melee units instead on your bench or on the field. Just be sure when you make your raid team, put a melee unit as your 6th unit just for combining. And then lastly, for Zhao builds, it's very important to know that it's very heavily affected by device performance and FPS. So if you're seeing low damage numbers on your Zhao Yun builds, but you think that you should be getting more, it's probably an FPS problem. So it's just something to note and know that it exists. With this build, with max level heroes, you can get around probably 7 to 10 million damage, pretty standard, easily. With +1 attack count, you can actually get like 12 to 18 million damage plus, depending on how high you rolled on your Lunaire tiers as usual. Currently, I'm just in a temporary alliance, as I mentioned, and I haven't really touched raid, so I can't really show you the full potential of the build. And I don't have a previous recording of this either, so I'm only able to show you a little bit of how the build goes with a 250k health boss. So yeah. All right, so let's go into a practice battle to show you how this build works. So let's go ahead and do it. I'm gonna have to position this a little differently than what I had. So something like this. Now the reason for this is that I want to cover as many Lunaires as possible with my Alberon, and then I want to keep as many units as I want in this range of Bard. And then I want to keep healing my Mercil, right? So if I put her here, it'll be out of range. So I'll have to do something like this, and then Zhao will have to be forced to side. So then he'll just go around. That Zhao actually takes his place. I'm going to freeze it right here. Alright, so if you notice that if we didn't have that tier 1 Zhao to occupy that space, our main carry Zhao Yun would actually be there instead, and that position actually doesn't count as side. It's still front. So you'll get that massive damage reduction, which isn't good. So just to let you know, all of this is counted as front, and then these are counted as side, and then the rest is behind, right? So actually, as I mentioned, you can actually do the same build with Mel, for example, and apply the same principle. So if you have Mel tier 5, and then you just add in a tier 1 melee unit of range 1, and then you can force Mel to side just like Zhao, and it's actually possible. And there it is, the current Blacksmith Boss meta build that all the top alliances use. Be sure to check out my other raid meta builds that I revealed. Thumbs if you liked it, subs if you loved it, and I'll see you in the next one. Later.